Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everybody.
Good
Welcome
morning,
back.
Mike.
Hello,
Good
my
morning.
friends.
All right. Well, we got a couple interesting openers today, things that have been coming across the internet, some stuff that came out very interesting. Tommy, I know you picked up on these things. It's funny how I read these articles and I see the topics of those articles immediately pop up on the podcast. Tommy's always on point with grabbing some interesting topics around here. Data goblins, as always, we absolutely love data goblins. So good. Well designed, super well thought out. We see Data Goblins coming out with an article around bar charts, how to create bullet charts in Power BI. This is really cool. Did you guys see this article at all and kind of check out his list of bar charts there, all the different types or ways you can style them?
It was insane. Yeah. So this was, I don't know if you actually opened the desktop file because that was the first thing I had to do. There are two things that I absolutely love that Kurt did here was really just basically took a single visual and made 28 out of them. And obviously it's one of those, how'd you do that? How many measures?
Always.
It's incredible because we've talked about this before. One of my favorite visuals is a lollipop chart, but it's really hard to.
You just like candy, Tommy.
I just like candy. It's actually a better representation. Anyways, but I was like, but there's not a really easy way to do that. But he's basically put together 20 different visuals all from once. It's like, yeah, I don't need custom visuals. But the best part is, little secret is everything he's GitHub, it's all in PBIP.
Oh, he used a PBIP to build it. People are starting to become really sneaky with developing things around PBIP now. I can say that because our theme generator now lets you build PBIP files as well, and I really like the format.
It's slick when unbeknownst to people that you can open it up and you just start going with a whole lot of things under the covers. This reminds me, Kurt always has a way to make me feel like I never really thought out an idea completely. Right? Like,
true.
It's like the components of something that I always had like 30%. And then, I have that other 20%, but he always pulls it together. And this one reminded me of like when Power BI like first came out, and we really should be doing this again as they're rolling out visualization changes, is like how far you can stretch into visual, like the different visualization types. And this was just, I think, a fantastic way, like Kurt does in all his blogs, to represent in a concise way, like, hey, have you ever wanted to? And here's like the look and feel of all the different ways you can use a bar chart. And it's fantastic. I love it.
I liked
get stuck into it. If you guys haven't seen this, it's a fantastic vlog.
Yes, it is.
And if
I recommend it.
Shows really how far, I think, also it just out of the box, Power BI has come in terms of some of the visualizations you can make. So I'm excited to see even the ones that have been out now, like the line chart now that they've updated, and all the cards, which isn't represented obviously in this particular blog, but
yes,
like I said, we'll have to revisit and go through and stretch the bounds of what kind of pretty visualizations we can put together.
Or maybe we just have Kurt Bueller now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kurt, there's a new line chart. Kurt, can you
do a blog about it, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I really like this one, and I love the fact that he's using a lot of standard visuals on the bar chart. Now, to your point, Tommy, that's where my mind always goes. I need to quickly download that file because I need to figure out what the heck did they do here? How did they style that thing so I could get it to look exactly like that one? I don't really. This is one of my pet peeves of Power BI, though. A lot of times I see other people's work on Power BI reports and think, oh, that's amazing. I really like that. I need to learn what that is. And it just feels at some level daunting because there's so many different ways. You have to know things to get these extra options. Like you don't get an easy button that says, oh, make a lollipop chart. And it just, boop, it makes it the way, like it just starts styling it. Like, so there's work that needs to be done in order to like figure out what to do and how to build this stuff. So to me, that's like always like a barrier to entry on a lot of things around Power BI. Is there's just a little bit more work to get it to style the way you want. If you want to just a standard bar chart the way Microsoft builds it, great, no problem. It's when you want to customize it got to kind of figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
Another article that came out this week, I guess it was this week. Actually, it's a little bit older, but we're picking up on it now. The Tale of Tabular Editor from Daniel O'Keir over in, I believe it's in Denmark area. Very cool article. Tommy, why did you pick this one? This is a little bit older, but what was your thought here?
It's just a nice story to kind of see like how in the world is there really, there's only one and there's only one and only tabular editor. How much we rely on that and what we do with it. And it's really kind of like the origin story of how did it actually come to be. Well, we all remember using when it was Tabular Editor 2, clunky, I guess, but that was my first moment of being intimidated by a software going, I don't know if I want to touch this, but just to kind of see that grow up story of something that's so integral to what we do now and the different things that like kind of ignited them to go, well, what if could we do that? And the next thing you know, it's, it is what it is today.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an interesting thought to see where Daniel has gone with this. So he started Tabular Editor 2 or Tabular Editor, did a reversion to it, made it Tabular Editor 2, and then now he has the actual Tabular Editor that you pay for, which is Tabular Editor 3. So Tabular Editor 2 is like a free version. You just get some basic editing things. You get a lot of what Tabular Editor 3 does, minus some more advanced features. And it's just interesting to see where Daniel kind of started. He started as a consultant. He built a tool. It helped him out immensely. And then he turned into a full-time developer. Like he literally, this is his job now. His job is to run Tabular Editor now, which is kind of interesting to see people talk about their career a little bit and how they got to where they are. Just always kind of fun.
Yeah, the things that struck me out of this were you guys share this lazy engineer kind of mentality where his story revolves around like somebody was just going to let him work on something for 5 days, and he's like that just so wasted my time. It's so manual work. I don't want to do that. And then the inception of Tabular Editor. So that I found funny.
Yeah.
If the community or people listening don't know about Tabular Editor, go look it up.
Yeah, it's the best.
Tabular Editor 2 alone is going to change your experience and how you interact with your.
It speeds you up immensely.
Power BI.
Just the speed alone.
Yeah. And so huge contribution from Daniel. And then like what I love about the article is his separation of what Tabular Editor 3 and that
true,
that is sustaining him, but how Tabular Editor 2 is its own product still, and it's the community one that he's gonna maintain, and that is very good to hear, right? And how he's like it's the life of how this thing that he came up with as a solution evolved into both a community tool that he constantly updates, and then also a way he can stay engaged in making both products better all the time. So love the article.
So I'll also put in here in the chat window, just because we love the tool so much, we did a 4-series blog or 4-video series. Basically, it's a 4-hour series with Daniel building out, okay, what's the introduction to Tabular Editor? How do you use scripts? What is a best practice analyzer? How to use that? And that alone right there is worth its weight in gold, just because you can use a tool to check if you're doing things in a weird way in models, and kind of gives you recommendations automatically. An automatic recommendation tool to performance tune your model. Great. Love that. And then their last one was talking about like, how do you use DevOps and Tabular Editor? Because Tabular Editor really was also letting you design the ability to create a data model and then deploy it using code. That's been kind of like the weak spot, I would say, of a lot of Power BI at this point. It's been a sore moment pretty much since the beginning, right? It's kind of initially, it hasn't really ever gotten there, but we're seeing a lot more strides here recently that's making a lot more parity with an actual deployment pipeline type stuff.
Yeah.
Then our last article today, which I think leads very well into our main topic, is there is now low-code authoring of paginated reports right off of the OneLake Data Hub.
This has got to have you excited, Mike.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm getting messages. The only people who tweet me are people like, I told you so.
Yeah, true, Tommy. It's not like, hi, hello, how you doing? It's more like, haha, I was right, you were wrong. I really do like the fact that there's more features being rounded out in creating paginated reports. You can now go to OneLake Data Hub you can right click or go click on the ellipsis, and you can directly click from there, create a paginated report, which is basically, again, this is my argument. I think there's two ways you want to access data. You want insights on data, or you want access to data. Paginated reports is a good way of just getting access to the data. So show up, build a report, make your columns, build your things, add some filters, boom, done. You have a table of data. Leave me alone. you have access to your data. You can go get what you want, and you can go build your yucky Excel stuff all day long, and you can leave me alone. So,
No.
what do you mean? No, it happens.
Aw.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's a shame.
It happens. I do recognize you can't do everything inside Power BI, so you definitely need some level of analyzing and mucking around with things inside Excel. I do recognize that, but I really like being Daniel O'Care and lazy and building systems that just do what I want repeatedly all the time. So that's actually a lot more of my favorite there. So there's a Microsoft blog talking more about that one. So what do you guys think? Any thoughts on this one?
Honestly, this is what I said the last time we actually had an entire episode devoted to paginated reports, where they've got to update the system. We have the technology where we don't have to be in this archaic, like a builder. And you can see that now. It's like, oh, wow, it's like a really easy UI to drag and drop a visual around. Do you know how difficult what you guys do know? But for those who don't know, if you ever use the report builder, just to drag a darn image across the screen and get it just where you want was a horrific experience. And it's not because you were dealing with data. It was just something from 1968. Where now all of a sudden they've built in, I don't know, Power Apps probably into this or something. So also Microsoft owned. So the ability to, and that's what people always wanted with the paginated reports. I want to be able to do this invoice or grab this data, but
Correct.
do it quickly. So we're getting there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great comment from Nico on LinkedIn that is kind of rebutting Mike's comment about Excel. He posts that tweet from Buck Woody. And if you don't know who Buck Woody is, like, you've got to follow him. He's a Microsoftie for life, but his little meme is like, there's a crab holding a fish, and the fish under it says entire global financial system, and the crab underneath is Microsoft Excel 2013.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Nico,
like,
I'm not
name
going
me some financial, name me a finance department person that is not so heavily involved in Excel.
Yes.
It's not even funny.
I'm not going to disagree with you. And I came from a world where the entire company, $1 billion company, ran on Excel. We were making decisions right out of Excel. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. It definitely does happen, and it definitely is needed. I mean, if you didn't have Excel, what would you do? Like, what would you? You have to, like, it's got to be there. Yeah. But on the other hand, I also think too, like, okay, it's good for like a single one-off thing. It's not as, it can automate it, and that's you're making me walk back on my comment a little bit. I mean, you're making me walk back on my comment. I do like it a lot. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying, of the things I prefer now, now that I've gotten my Power BI tattoo, I have to say Power BI is the best.
That is probably one of the better images you're going to see, and probably devoted to its own episode to talk about how much of Wall Street and the financial world still relies on it, like it's Toledo or whatever.
That is not a good episode.
What was it?
It's like 99%, except for the ones like Google. Google probably the only one because they have sheets.
Yeah. What was the software before Excel started with an L?
Lotus 123.
Yeah.
Lotus Notes.
So
I think that was the other one, I believe. An IBM product, I think it was. Where's Greg Baldini when you need him to fact check everything? Because he'll know, like, it was made on October 3rd, 1990 or whatever it was. So
you want to talk about the need for data governance? I'm reading a few like historical finance books, and what took off everything in terms of the 70s and the 80s was Lotus.
Mm-hmm. I played with this very briefly when it first came out. I remember initially working on it a little bit. Excel hadn't fully taken over everything yet at that point. Anyways, I'm reminiscing and having fond memories of moving around inside Visual Basic, trying to build random automation things inside Excel, because again, I was lazy and wanted to be efficient and press a button and have a whole bunch of things calculate. So Wow, we're pulling out we're pulling out some really good ones here. Lotus 123 for DOS. We have VisiCalc, ASCII charts. These are things I have never heard of.
This is where you start feeling young again, Mike.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Excellent.
especially from the engineering world too. My dad's an engineer, and he does a lot of they do a lot of testing, and I'm like, what do you use? It's either like
he's like CSV files. Because I did that. I was like, yeah, the
what
machine
software?
outputs.
Yeah,
the machine outputs a CSV file. Great. Now I have to go parse that dumb thing and
now
add it
we're
to
gonna
all the other data.
now we're gonna have our development team build an application just to do it themselves. So
It's crazy. It's great. Yeah, I was talking with I was talking with Data Goblins Kurt, and he was talking about how there's a big miss in the it's in the data collection world of PhD and scientists. They do all this work to collect this data, and it just gets stuck in like Excel sheets or random places. There's no database. There's no way to like automate it. And there would be a lot more integrity in research data if there was systems that could immediately absorb data directly from the machines. So Power BI could serve a purpose there. We could see how it would work. So anyways, I digress. Let's move on to our main topic today, which I think is also going to be extremely controversial. And I'm also very disappointed Greg Baldini is not here for this one, because I think he would also have some words for us here as well. The article for today is from an individual we talk about a lot on the podcast. Matthew Roach, who came up with Roach's maxim, transform the data as far upstream as possible and as far downstream as necessary. So, great article. We're gonna go through Microsoft Fabric and then falling in love with SQL all over again. So this is the article for today. But really, our conversation today is around, okay, we have SQL. We have this thing called OneLake. Fight. Do you put everything in SQL now, or do you put everything in the OneLake and use SQL to access information in OneLake? And where are the decision and or breakpoints around? Now we have this new Fabric thing. There's a lot more SQL that we've never had before in place. How is this going to change how we work? What is this going to look like? Is that a good summary topic of what we're doing here, Tommy? Anything else I missed here that you would like to kind of add into our topic of today? I'll put the article here in the chat window.
No, I think that's spot on. I think in terms of what this radical shift is going to be, and what I'm finding myself in both macro situations or micro situations for my own purpose, but then also thinking about teams as a whole, and just how much these obviously Fabric huge, but just some of those shifts with OneLake and what it can do, but the data flows pushing and storing this data now is so accessible, really changes the conversation.
I'm not sure if it changes it.
It wasn't a conversation before.
Here's how I would. Yes and no. I mean, this is where Seth and I typically butt heads over things. So, Michael will air a little dirty laundry. Seth loves SQL. SQL guy, came out of the SQL world. Michael loves lake houses. So we kind of always like we're continually, let's call it debate. Where should the data live, and where does it make sense for the cheapest, the easiest way for users and or data engineering things to happen inside that landscape? Now, I will not be so naive to say we're going to call SQL dead, we're never going to use it again. That's not what I'm saying here. I think Seth and I've had this conversation with clients. SQL runs the world, right? You can tell me other languages run the world. Maybe Python is a pretty big player in this space, but at the end of the day, any company, there are people writing SQL. There is databases that are being built, and this language is so universal about how it uses to access and manipulate data. It's just there. Where I think things are getting, to me, this new Fabric thing is blurring the line a lot more for me. And I'm not quite sure where I always should put all of my data. What is the use case for using the SQL Server endpoint versus just straight up dropping it into the lake and calling it done, right? So it's I'm not saying it's changing the game. To me, it's just blurring the line a lot more. It's making it more difficult to understand where's the right place to put things because it's getting so similar to me in my mind. Thoughts, Seth?
Oh boy.
He's
my
cooking up something good.
My thoughts are, if you air dirty laundry, make it factual and accurate.
Okay.
Well, okay.
I think there's a significant difference between the SQL language and or other languages that we've discussed versus storage engine and where things are at, because I don't think we disagree at all around platforms that support big data and those being much better in structures that are like similar to what Fabric is supporting in OneLake, Databricks, etc. Delta tables are absolutely the method to go about handling large volumes of data in those spectrums. So I think maybe it would have been laundry from 4 years ago or 5, but
True.
In any case,
maybe I converted you a little bit. Maybe we kind of.
Sure, Mike. Sure. You have led me down the path, Mike, and I can't thank you enough. Let's just get it out. Let's get it out in this episode, Mike. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you holding my hand down this path.
No,
into the light. Let me express how I truly feel.
Just gratitude.
I can't stop. I gotta stop.
That's so much sarcasm.
/S.
Yes. Well, and it was interesting because at the time, Databricks was coming out with a lot of this stuff around Lakehouse, medallion architectures. At the same time, I was going through my master's in data science, and there was a lot of talk around Spark, this stuff, like figuring things out. And I was like, ugh, Spark is such a pain. I was building Hadoop clusters and trying to run stuff. I was like, I don't want to write map-reduced jobs. This is horrible. And so, like, it was just awful, absolutely awful. And then they started introducing me to, I don't know what it was called, Hive or something like that. I can't remember what's the language of the Spark engine, but Spark eventually pops out and says, hey, we'll let you write SQL against your data tables. Oh, okay. I can figure that stuff out. And that made sense to me. So like, I don't have to write all this crazy like Scala stuff over and over again, or, even PySpark. I can just write things in like SQL. And again, once that turned on, everything got a lot easier for me. So, I mean, I think there's where I think things for me have changed is I think the emphasis is less on like, I need a SQL server and a machine to run the SQL, as opposed to now where I'm either borrowing a compute engine to go access data in Delta tables, or I'm using I now can use Python and Spark to go directly access the information. I'm still using the language of SQL to do a lot of data manipulation, but I think the infrastructure behind the scenes potentially is slightly changing, and it's really allowing us to have larger volumes of data, better multi-threading, because Microsoft, I think, really botched the whole massive parallel processing for SQL. It was just way overpriced and not really as cheaply or as easy to be able to run as a lot of the Spark things.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's also one of the reasons why this is like this conversation is even like we're comparing these, right? If you
yes,
the same infrastructure you had to set up that was extremely complex, right? And then you have to like building your own Hive cluster, Spark engine, all that, like that was simplified by Databricks, by Fabric, like all these things. Like this is why Fabric is fantastic, or tools like it, like consolidate it all. And like even what we're going to talk about today, like consolidate it all. And oh my gosh, this is so difficult to go create a connection and suck in my data. Right? Like I want to create a new warehouse, new. I want to create a new lake house, new. Right?
Done.
Like,
yeah.
Like that's an absurd concept even 5 years ago.
Yeah. And I feel like one of my every time I talk to people or particularly consultants, they're like, oh, we have this old SQL thing. Okay, great. Oh, and we have all these SSIS packages. Yeah. Every time someone says that, I hear groaning. Just like, ugh. Like
the gnashing and wailing of teeth.
Yes. And then people are like, we got to get off of this stuff. I mean, it works. It gets things done. I don't think it's not dead by any means, but it's like a lot of companies are trying to say, we really want to move away from that, something a bit more modern. It's just a bit too clunky, I think, nowadays. And now with everything being in the web, everyone's expecting more of this UI-based web experience and doing a lot of your data engineering there. And Tommy and I have been doing this whole Fabric Learn Fabric series. And it's been very good, I think, for me to really get my head around what is Fabric and how does this relate to everything I do in Power BI. And if I had to like put my, a big lens on and kind of look at what, at the end of the day, Fabric is just Synapse moving to Power BI. It's literally, that's all they did is take some of the best pieces of Synapse, rebrand them, simplify them a little bit more, and just literally verbatim drop them right into Power BI. Most everything is there, with the exception, I think, of Direct Lake. And I think there's one core technology change here where the data tables you're storing is in the Delta format. And this, I think, to me, is the secret sauce to why I prefer OneLake type things or OneLake elements over maybe just straight SQL things, like a SQL server, right? So I want to make a distinction here for me. I still love SQL. I really think the OneLake is very powerful, but I think Microsoft actually renamed the OneLake incorrectly. I think the naming schema is how I've been thinking about OneLake and lake houses. The way Microsoft is talking about it is almost, it's a miss based on my understanding of what a lake house really is. So we'll go in there.
Why is it a miss?
Well, so let me unpack.
I'll make sure we'll get the suggestion cards.
I don't know what you'd name it, but I mean, so the OneLake is so again, I come from my Databricks world, so their whole methodology, Databricks pretty much coined the whole idea or concept around lake houses. There may have been other people talking about it, but Databricks has very been pro on this idea of a lake house. The concept of a lake house is you can have n number of storage accounts in a lake house. All those storage accounts store tables or whatever data you want, and then you just basically put that data into that lake house with various formats.
Okay.
So, in my opinion, that is where all the storage accounts live. To me, the lake house is equivalent to the terminology Microsoft is using right now called OneLake. OneLake is a collection of multiple, it's a service, basically. It's a service for you that lets you have, I don't know how many storage accounts, right? You can co-locate data in regions. You can reference them with shortcuts, right? So the OneLake has potentially multiple storage accounts that are region-based that you're just putting data in, and Microsoft as a service just kind of handles where the data goes for you. Awesome. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. Then you put a compute layer on top of that. And then, in my opinion, the objects called lake houses are actually called databases. They're actually a database from a SQL term, right? You have the server of SQL. The server is all the compute and storage for any database you would have. The databases are what Microsoft is calling a lake house, right? It's a way to collect tables together of a similar nature, right? Here's my enterprise warehouse. I'm going to put all the tables for that stuff inside a single database. So that's equivalent now to the lake house, right? You may have dev test prod of the servers, right? Or a dev test prod of different databases. You make a lake house for dev test prod. And that way you can segment or physically segment access control and or objects away from each other. So when I click on the lake house that is a prod environment, I only see tables that are prod based. So to me, the equivalent language here is OneLake is equivalent to Lakehouse, or the Lakehouse, the storage accounts. The Lakehouse objects that we see in Fabric is equivalent to database, and then you get tables and files inside the database. So that's my mental model. As I've been playing with the system, it feels like this works well. I mean, that seems to translate to what I know today. So that's kind of why I think they named it incorrectly. I feel like the Lakehouse as a single object that stores tables is not just is the Lakehouse term is too descriptive or is too open, whereas what they're actually building is something much more narrow. It's literally a smaller thing of tables and files. That's it, which is equivalent to a database. Does that make sense? Am I making
conceptually? Yes, it does.
So,
but I don't like. So to say they named it the wrong thing, I'm not going to go that far. but I get that even in the diagrams that they have, like technically, is it because they're stepping people towards this new paradigm of how to think about data within an ecosystem and the storage of that is all now the same, right? All their marketing stuff is warehouse, lakehouse, CustoDB, dataset, right? As separators in OneLake, but all those file formats are the same. So it speaks to your point, which is
Yes.
like, why are you calling this something different?
Yes.
But maybe it's just the journey by which you're leading people to this new paradigm, because
Yes.
it's a new like then the questions would be, well, if everything's in Delta format, why do I have 4 different ways to interact with it?
Correct.
It's like, because you're used to it, right? Like,
Yes.
you're used to the SQL warehouse, you're
Yes.
used to the Synapse experience in data science, and you're used to the Lakehouse and Jupyter notebooks. Well, why wouldn't you just unify this all into one thing? Well, maybe that's where we're going, Mike, right? Like, it's
Maybe,
the
yeah.
one thing that you're going to need down the road. On top of that, though, and like, there is one security, there's a lot that goes on. Like, if you think about the actual technologies underpinning all this, you know, I'm sure that there's like, it's not like all that just went away, but it's probably the storage method that is the newest, latest thing of like having all of that, you know, T-SQL, that SQL warehouse now being stored in Delta Parquet, right? And that's the unique thing, that we get this interactive experience between all of these different interfaces into the data. So I don't know enough about the back ends. It's not like I totally disagree with your conceptual model of things.
Yes.
But I don't know if I'd go as far as saying like, yeah, that whole thing is the lake house and that's what you should just call it.
I think honestly, there's a big part here though too. Obviously, how technical it can get. Mike, I messaged you the other day about kind of the same idea. How much of that's going to be necessary for the majority of people who are going to be at least focusing on the fabric? Like, yeah, if you're coming from the data engineering world, yeah, like there's obviously, you're not going to go, well, let me see what this this warehouse and fabric is. You're going to kind of maybe transition, but there's a whole audience of people who are not necessarily going to, like you said, jump the Hadoop, but are going to see this as a really great solution to finally store and push data, that they don't have to go all the way up to becoming the full-on data engineer.
So this is a really good point you bring up here, Tommy, because I think there's two parts to this and how I'm looking at it, right? I'm looking at it from, I think I'm looking at Fabric coming into Fabric as if I would probably quantify myself as a pretty solid data engineer. I mean, maybe like a senior data engineer, like that's my world I've been building here. As I walk into this, I understand what you could build in Databricks. I understand the debugging. I understand the Unity catalog that we're doing in other systems, right? I understand other tooling, and Microsoft is kind of still playing catch up, in my opinion, right? Purview's not there. You know, it doesn't do the same things that Unity catalog does. There's gaps, I think, in the system. So looking at what Fabric is doing from a data engineering standpoint, I think it's a little bit lacking. And I think data engineers are going to show up and be like, it's okay, but it's still watered down too much for what a data engineer would really want to be doing. I think, my opinion on this one. However, when I look at this from the perspective of the business developer or business user who's experimenting more with data engineering activities, I think this is giving them a lot more capability than they ever had before. And the fact that they can pick a notebook, and actually I've been seeing Alex Powers sing the praise. I mean, Alex Powers is huge on Power Query. He loves it. I've seen a lot of tweets and posts from him talking a lot more around, man, do I really love notebooks? Do I love Data Wrangler? That's a pure Spark thing. That's writing code. And again, I don't think Alex Powers is anyone to shy away from code, because he doesn't even use the UI and M, just FYI. He literally just wakes up one day and is like, I'm going to write M. And he just goes to the advanced editor. He just uses that exclusively now. So like he's on another level. I'll just say that. However, he's enjoying the notebook experience. And I think from a business user, I really enjoy using all the Fabric things. I like how it's so much more integrated. I don't have to worry about spinning up clusters. I don't have to worry about spinning up notebooks and things. I literally just click on an object, create notebook, boom, done. Let's get going. I'm going to make a pipeline. Great. 2 clicks, I'm making a pipeline. I'm not worrying about ADF and integrating things and connection strings and all that. There's a lot of things that are not there that we just get by default. So for me, the perspective right now is like, I really like, I think of the 2 personas, the business analyst or business engineer, business data engineer, I'm going to call it that, and then a true data engineer from IT data engineering, I think the person getting the better end of the deal is the business user turning towards data engineering.
1000%.
They're getting tools that are more reliable. They're bigger. You can do more as that business user. Whereas I think the data engineer is going to walk into Fabric and go, well, where's my debugging? Where's all this extra features? Where's all these other things that I was typically used to doing? And I'm getting down a watered down version of data engineering. Not to say it won't get there, but for right now, I think they're getting a little bit less than they're normally used to.
So there's always going to be extreme use cases where complex data engineering tasks are going to have to happen that aren't going to be supported directly in Fabric. But Fabric is an analytics tool.
But
it's designed to solve the business intelligence problems of the world, right? Like analytics, but you're saying, there's a thought in here, so apologies for the the back and forth of the thinking here, though.
Yes.
I don't disagree that it's designed for the business. In the same way Power BI came out,
sure,
there were not the same amount of features that we have right now. It's probably going to be the same thing where it's an evolution, right? We're in preview as well. So we're not even at a point where they're saying this product is completely put together and solves all the things that we would want it to.
Correct. It's going to be growing.
Right. But in that foundation, how deep do you really need to go? Right? Like you're enabling teams. Like the enablement of Fabric is so much higher because you don't have to deal with the infrastructure, right? It's a service that you just plug into and do what you need to do as a person that's dealing with data, which is connect the data, manipulate it, transform it, build the things you need to support reporting in an efficient and performant way. Right? Like, of course, there's going to be edge cases. Of course, you're going to need some system that's going to deal with like massive volumes of data that you need to rip through, and you need to do all these like hardcore ETL tasks. And great, you can do that. And then you can land it in OneLake, make it a data source for analytic needs. Like, I would be cautious around saying Fabric's like the de facto end-to-end forever tool for all of these things, because that's not what Microsoft's saying.
I think we agree with that. Yeah, right? I would agree.
These tool sets still exist outside these this architecture. I think it's designed for data that's in systems that needs to be transformed for reporting purposes. And in that case, it opens the door completely for business users, but it's not like you're not getting the core functionality that you need to do that, 80-90% of the job that you would normally do with data cleansing before putting in a report layer. Do you think?
So I'm gonna,
Mike, I mean, you made the point that it's like you think it's lacking in certain areas,
correct,
specific to a hardcore data engineer.
Agreed.
But I'm challenging like the data. Is that a role that belongs in Fabric?
I think if you read Microsoft documentation and they're utterly confusing documentation around, hey, these are our user personas for Fabric, and all of them are data engineers. So like if you listen to, I feel like if I listen to what Microsoft is saying, they're saying, yes, 100% data engineers will be happy here. You'll love it. It's the way to go. I'm just not sure I'm convinced yet of that story. I think it needs more time to mature to that point. But what I will say, Seth, to your point here, right? Microsoft, I don't think we should, again, I agree with you. I don't think we should be pushing Fabric and saying this is the way everyone must play here now moving forward forever. And all engineers, all data scientists, everyone plays in this space. I think it definitely removes some pain points away from that audience, and I think it will get better over time. However, what I will say is the ease of integration of what Fabric is doing against what's traditionally been done as the data engineering role, right? The idea that I can still make Delta tables, I can still employ Databricks, I can still build my own lakes somewhere else in IT, and then basically provide a shortcut to the output of that team. I mean, to me, this is the neat secret sauce here is, yes, we're talking like what has happened is a lot of the IT technology that we're trying to move forward in the next 10 years or whatever this is going to be, now that is now in place, usable, and it's going to make the business user's life a whole lot easier to integrate and connect directly to what the IT team is doing, right? You've already got data lakes and blob storage accounts already started up. Great, no problem. Provide me a shortcut to that storage account. Boom. All these Delta tables can now appear in my business user space as read-only objects. That's what we want. Go ahead, IT. You own everything above this step here. Give me tables of data, and I'll figure out what to do with it downstream. This is, I think, also, talking about data. I'm doing a lot of data governance and deployment stuff right now. This is creating much headache for ITs and business. Like, there is literally a mindset shift that is happening here, where traditionally IT just gives you reports, here you go, walk away. We now have the capability of giving them cubes, which some teams also do. That's also been a thing. And now we're going all the way back up and saying, hey, here's the raw tables that I get out of these systems, and can give you even further access upstream, because the tooling now, I can build my own notebooks. I can build my own data engineering processes and pipelines in the business now. So like, to me, like, this is another whole realm of things that are going to be enhancing our experience.
Oh, okay.
It does, but it's not anything new. I think
it's not.
What's new is how quickly we could turn those things around.
Agree there. Yes. I don't need to have a credit card stuck in Azure at this point. I can turn on Fabric, and a lot more of these tools just show up.
Isn't that a prerequisite?
Later, yeah.
Isn't that a prerequisite? Like,
what was that?
Isn't that a prerequisite
for Fabric?
Sticking your card in Azure first.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, it's not free.
No, it's not free. Not free. But I'm saying
it's been great. It's been a great trial.
But the ease of it, though, like, if I get, before I had to go buy Databricks, I had to go buy these things. Like, so there was infrastructure that needed to be set up. A lot less of that now in Fabric. It's just there, and you can just, okay, I'm just going to buy one SKU, and I get Azure Data Factory. I get essentially security with Key Vault. I get OneLake security. Like, there's all these other things that come along with it that I think make it, again, less of a barrier of entry for teams.
Yeah. So, Seth, you had me up until the very end of what you were saying. I agree with everything you're going with these. I don't, as we've been going more into the Fabric with our Let's Learn Fabric series. I'll get there. So I wanted to show you how much I did agree. So, and then
we disagree.
Lay it on slowly. Yes. But, and just, I think what's been going on is, it's not the business user all of a sudden. Now every Power BI developer has to become a full-on engineer stack. That's not going to be the story, which that was what I initially thought. I'm like, oh, great. Now I also have to be like 10 years experience in PySpark, 10 years experience in Databricks just to do my job. And that's not going to be the case. The only thing I didn't agree with what you said was at the very end, where the majority of things are going to be solved, where it's just going to be for reporting purposes. I agree with half that statement, where I really think even take away the notebooks and even the lakehouse and just give me somewhere I can actually store my data, and then I can connect to it in another pull up. So the business users, the Power BI developers now, what have they been doing for the last 10 years? They've been taking faulty data and raw data and structuring it. The only problem is it's lived in a data set in a Power BI report, but those cleaned tables can be used in other places.
Mm-hmm.
So these business users now have the ability to actually push and store this data in places that the business can actually use outside of just Power BI. Because before, all the logic that I was doing in data flows,
stayed in
that realm.
Power BI became a sinkhole, basically, right? Everything fell into it, and nothing came out. Like, it was just this absorbing black hole type thing. Right. Yes, that's a good point. Yes.
Right. And so that is the seismic shift, where now I can take the same tools and already principles that I've already applied. Just give me your CSV files, you're poor, you're hungry, and I will clean it for you. But it just lived in, and
this is an interesting topic you're thinking about here, Tommy. I don't think I've actually jumped to this level of, like, you're now involving the business in potentially part of the data engineering process. Hey, do some stuff, engineer some data, spit it, put it back in a SQL server, put it back.
And we've literally been programmed to clean and structure tables. Like, for the last 10 years, we didn't even know it.
True.
But so now I have the ability to take all this faulty marketing and then be able to give it back to them in their own systems where they need to connect to it, where it can live outside of just Power BI. There's a majority of the things I probably won't have to even touch a notebook. Maybe there's some use cases, but I already have had the ability to do things now. I mean, I'll learn some pipelines, sure. I'm sure there's other use cases, but if I didn't need a notebook before, why in the world would that person need it now? What are they all of a sudden getting introduced to them now? There may be some cases, but the majority of the time, I really think that what's going to happen is it's going to be the twofold, where it's going to be not just for reporting. It's going to just open up so many other doors where, yeah, I can push it back to your SQL database. So then we can, utilize it. So I'm creating data flows, and I'm doing other things I've already been doing, but now it has such more access from the raw end.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is another use case that is becoming more enabled by not letting Power BI be purely a ingest only method.
Right.
It actually has the ability of now outputting data to certain.
So
yeah.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, because in my mind, there are two major differences here. If you're saying, we've had this conversation too, especially with workspaces or business units, if they own their end-to-end pipeline and clean data, that's a fantastic idea. Like in a world where they have a third-party system, they are ingesting data into Fabric, they're doing ETL, and the output of that is either a table of clean data. Well, it's two things. It's an object of data that is quality and reports on top of that, because that's the source for reporting. We do that every single day, right? It's the same methodology anyway. You're saying like clean to like push it as far back as you can so you can reuse this component of clean data as much as possible. Like we've talked about that. If that means I'm giving access to that table to the business so they can leverage that, that's fantastic. It's cleaned data. It's gone through a process of data quality, governance, et cetera, to give them value in the business. It's still reporting data. It's still data that is out of systems and run through pipelines to make sense for them. Is it in a report? No, but that's also why we provide data to them in these tables, in reports, in whatever. If, to me, 100% agree. You own the whole pipeline. Let the company access these clean tables of data to merge with other data sets or whatever. Like this could be part of the whole ecosystem of how you govern data within Fabric. I agree with you. If you're suggesting that in Fabric, we should start pushing source systems of data. No, I don't. I'm not on that train right now, because now you're talking about like, how do other applications work within this ecosystem? Like, to me, it is not that, right? And to that point, then everything beyond that, like in my first pipeline point, means everything we're doing is for reporting. It's for the business to understand what's going on in their ecosystems, and where they're going to correct data problems are in the actual source production systems, which could be third party. It could be a SQL server somewhere else. It could be, whatever the case may be. Once we're talking Lake, I think we're already in the analytics realm, right? Okay. You're ingesting data into a central repository of information, like area that you typically wouldn't normally like use outside of a reporting purpose, whether that's internal or external.
So your comment hits me two ways, Seth.
Yeah.
No,
I see your face.
On one hand, I totally agree. Like on one hand, I'm thinking about like the Lake. Yes, reporting. We're moving away from online analytical transactional processing (OLTP) to online analytical processing. So the analytical, like the reporting side. I would agree. I feel very strong there. But I've had some use cases where people have asked me, "Hey, if I did something to data, if I blended some stuff with information, how could I return it back to a team and give them some more refinement around what that would be used, and then that could be utilized back inside the system?" So on one hand, I agree with you on a lot.
Separate. I think that's the delineation.
Okay.
Source systems that collect data, call it like CRM.
Yes.
Right. It's not a manual thing. Like what we're talking, if you have a business unit that supplements source data with business process, right, which you're communicating, I think, where we have like, hey, we have some supplemental stuff that isn't going into our third-party system, but we do need it as part of like our reporting ecosystem, then yeah, of course, like it allows for them to enhance data that they use to run the business. But if it was integral to the source system, they would figure out how to plug that thing into the source system, not in their own, not in this process.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can see that as well. Yeah, if you're really seeing the need for the business to refine or adjust things, there's another process. And where my mind slightly goes here a little bit, and where I say maybe I would challenge slightly here is if I think about what happens inside the Power Apps experience, right? Power Apps is essentially, I mean, it's building apps on top of data that is in potentially production, right? It's dynamics level data. You're building apps on top of that information. You're editing those real tables. I feel like that's Power App story is somewhere around. We have one source of records. We have one source of truth that is production, and we're able to get it out, edit it, do some things to it, report on it, and then get back in there and make immediate edits back to production. To your point, though, Seth, I agree. There's like this other challenge around, like, well, what if the data comes from Salesforce? What if there's another third-party tool we have to go get it in, and we have to bring it down to our lake? And I think, while I agree with your thinking here, I do think there's an idea in the future here where, or Microsoft is trying to make it such that it doesn't really matter what you do. They're not sure I would recommend it yet, but they're going to make it so that you could pull data out of a system, do some stuff with it, and then try to push it back or try to write it back to that system. And Alex was saying here in the comments, if you can't get a Power Query or some kind of Power Query thing to push data back out using, a Power Query flow, you for sure could make a whole bunch of API calls inside a notebook, and you could start talking to APIs of things. So you could go get a bunch of data out of a system. You could use a notebook to connect to the Salesforce API, and you could then start writing data back into Salesforce or updating things or whatever.
Right. But that's a different thing. That is creating a process within here to say, I have identified data quality problems. Go fix them in my source system. That is different than making Fabric a source system for production workloads in and out. And I don't agree with that. That was the point Tommy was making.
Well, no, I'm not saying it's the source system because it's
you did, because if all of these things are not for reporting, what are they for?
They're going to push back to somewhere. They're going to go to another. Okay, hold on. No, you're not going to do your magic putting words in my mouth again today.
So, I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Yeah. So,
Rewind.
but I'm agreeing completely with what Mike's saying here in regards to I don't think that's even that much farther down the road, Mike, either. That capability is basically here if people realize it.
I feel like there's a rat's nest of things I could do. I'm not saying I would recommend it, but like you could really do this. You could bring data out. You could let the business do stuff with information, merge it, blend it, do whatever they want to do with other things. And you could potentially try to push it back up into systems. Not saying it's right. I'm just saying the potential to do it is becoming easier and easier, I think.
Right. It's finally now where you look at where the Power BI platform is in terms of the whole integration story. It's literally just got a lot fatter in terms of now can talk back. Again, I don't think that can be underemphasized in terms of we have the ability to go, whether we're storing it in a lake house, which I think that's what you're saying. But if I need to put into a database and let someone else do something with that, at least it's the transformations and that quick ability now where I didn't have to rely on them. What's becoming archaic now, or some of the archaic ways we had to connect to data before. There's such a big part here of not just the ownership, but don't worry, I am very weary of a lot of the things too in Fabric. There's not necessarily the protection if things do go wrong, because once you start talking about having source data and data that's going to go to other systems, you need to have those layers of backups. That's why you have people who obviously it's more than just making a data clean. It's about that protection if systems go wrong. My goodness, you get one error and then everything would break. But I digress on that point. What I'm saying here is there's now an ability here where with the same skills that I've already had, if I am just coming from Power BI, maybe expanded a little, I now have the ability that someone in Databricks or someone very higher up the chain has and has had, to be able to now have data in the same place they've had, but also do some of the same transformations. now I have a very good idea of, or I'm on that almost that same playing field. I just may not know it.
I mean, that's different than what you were thinking. I think that's different than what you were saying earlier. I felt like you were saying earlier, I'm going to take data out of a system, do some stuff to it, maybe add an Excel sheet, add some enhancement, add some
Sure.
columns or fields, and then try and write that data back up into
Well, that's what I'm saying.
like,
So yeah, maybe I said it wrong.
but
So
what you're saying now, it sounds like you're saying there's capability. The business users are now getting of the tooling we have today. We now have capabilities of doing things that we would traditionally see being done by a data engineer.
well,
And those
okay,
skills
yeah,
now
I see.
are available to us at this level now.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. So let me give a solid example. We'll go back on the
Okay,
same
let's do an
playing
example.
field. Think about all these critical mass systems that companies have that are still coming from Excel files and CSV that we have the responsibility of putting into the report. It had to come from
Yep.
these old dirty systems. They were never going to go into the engineering side. And the only unfortunate thing is it lived in that report or that model. And then,
Lots of that local tribal knowledge.
right,
Yes, correct.
right. But that was mission critical. And that's what things were reported to finance, but
Okay.
it was essential. I can now take the same basically methodology that I've done, and now I can, and rather than having that only live in this little Power BI world, I can now push that and actually store it as a table in SQL. And now it has the same function, like with all of the bells and whistles that a normal SQL table would have.
So are you saying something along to the effect of, I had a system, I would export a bunch of data out. That export data would live in an Excel sheet. I would do data engineering
Or
to that Excel
however it
sheet.
can-
I would
yeah.
manipulate it, and then I would email out that Excel sheet to lots of other people, therefore adding value of that table or information that I've developed. You're saying now in Power BI, do the same thing, but now just do it inside a Power BI space where I'm writing the data out to a SQL server, a system, a place.
Right.
That the entire organization then can get value from that same engineered data.
Right, because for the
I would
last
agree with
7
that.
years, once Power Query touched something, it was stuck. It was there, and it was going to be in Power BI. It was never going back up, no matter what I cleaned in Power BI. But it was going to stay in that world. But now I can basically create a SQL table that's in a sense it's not necessarily any more special, but it can speak to how many systems. You said SQL rules the world, and now I can actually, in a sense, talk back.
I agree with that. I think I agree with like that kind of feature or capability addition, right? It's a capability addition to what we've already been doing. Well, I do think we kind of hit a lull here, or at least we were out of time. Let me say it that way. We probably could talk about this for another 30 minutes easily. So I do want to say this has gone incredibly fast. Thank you, everyone. The chat has been absolutely lively. Really good things in comments here in chat. I want to call out a couple. Kurt, thanks for showing up. Alex, really appreciate you. You heard us. Apparently, your ears were burning when we were talking about you earlier about how you brute force write all your M code without even looking at the UI. So we apparently that is your beacon. The bat signal for M. So thank you very much for everyone chatting and participating in the chat window. We really appreciate you. Our only ask with this episode or any of our episodes, if you like what you hear here, if you like what you're listening to, or if this is challenging your thinking, right? If this is kind of making you think more about what this new ecosystem is going to be doing, we really would love you to share this with somebody else. So please write a little social post, give us a thumbs up, maybe subscribe. We really like the feedback and engagement from the community. Please share with someone else that you think might find this podcast either boring or valuable. I mean, give it to your evil enemies, right? Here we go. Listen to this great podcast and let them doze themselves off to sleep. Or if you have friends, let them know it's great and you love it. So we appreciate that too. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere it's available on Google, Spotify, and Apple. Make sure to subscribe. If you have a topic or an idea that you want us to talk about, you have the ability to do so. Talk upstream like data flows are doing now. Go to powerbi.tips/the podcast and just submit a mailbag. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central.
Do we have a data flow for our mailbag? We do, don't we?
I can make it a SQL table.
There we go. Let's put all the mailbag into SQL. Let's go right back to source systems. I love it. This is amazing. Everyone, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We'll catch you next time. Cheers.